I see people doing master's degree just to increase their career prospects because either they can freelance, either they can work in a job. Another major misconception is that your salary will increase and your package will increase.
But not to that.
Not to that level.
It's tough to go back and to the grind of long nights and not sleep. But you have grown mentally. You have sort of clarified your thinking. Easier, much easier to gain critical thinking skills in college
Yeah.
than it is in working in a firm because there are deadlines and you don't usually, for a few years, reach that decision making.
Yeah.
Everyone talks about this dilemma. कि
Yeah.
जो लोग निकलते हैं, do you want to be ready to make working drawings? Do you want them to be systematic thinkers, critical thinkers, etc.? I prefer a critical thinker.
Another episode of Insyd Converse. I am architect Saumya Bansal, co-founder of Insyd, a professional platform for architects. Today, I have a very special guest with me, architect Nikhil Dhar. He used to teach me landscape architecture when I was a student at HPA Delhi. Today, he has agreed to spare his time to talk to us about the state of education in India and does a master's degree make sense? What to do if you are an aspiring master's student in India? A little about Nikhil's career. He is the program chair of landscape architecture at IES College. He has been practicing landscape architecture for 29 years and he has been teaching for more than 15 years now. Very welcome to the podcast. How are you doing?
I'm very well, thank you. Good to be here.
I would like to start with your experience. You have been practicing for almost 3 decades now. So, what changes have you seen in the industry happening for these 3 decades?
One of the major changes has been the importance of landscape architect and how they are now accepted as core members of team, especially for larger projects. Because I remember a time when landscape architecture was seen as planting.
Outcasted. Hmm.
And now, one of the first things that a team would do for the even a medium-sized project would be to appoint a landscape architect to work on it, open to suggestions from the landscape architect. Even things supposedly do not directly involve them. So, for instance, small changes in the site plan are now landscape architects are often listened to rather than being appointed as an afterthought after all the stuff was built. So I think that's an important thing. And this is something that we used to lament for बहुत problem है, nobody, respects us. I think that has changed. That's a major thing. Um,
But has it changed so much? I mean, when I used to work in office, this was a common problem even then, and it was just 2 years back. You know, I mean, we were still. So there were two stages when landscape architects were consulted, right? So first was during the planning stage, जहाँ पे हमको पूरा master plan बनाना है किसी भी project.
right.
हमने यहाँ यहाँ पे गड़बड़ कर दी है. Now these are the manholes that you have to hide. These are the sewer lines जो यहाँ से. This is the only like 2 inch thickness जो हम आपको दे सकते हैं soil की. अभी देखो इसमें क्या क्या कर सकते हैं.
Made something, the more senior you get,
Hmm.
you are listened to more, which is very sad. I mean, white hair is no sign of wisdom, but unfortunately, it's seen in our country often. As the more experienced you are, the more you have to contribute. Experience helps, but it's not everything. So, something I've been with that I've seen these changes in my
Yeah.
practice over the years, perhaps. Yeah, that might be it.
Maybe, I am coming from a very entitled position to say this. And because you have seen those changes happening over the years. And then the newer generation comes and say, कि अरे ये तो होता ही नहीं है.
Mm.
And he's going to,
कोई शायद बीत और पीत चल रहा है the thing of beautification
Hmm.
and the landscape. I think one thing that's also changing, because landscapes are getting involved in
Hmm.
city landscapes or public landscape, so they're a little more visible as well. And the importance of landscape architecture is
More
you know,
accepted. Yes,
that it
yes.
was. I'm just trying to think of any other changes. The fact about teams including landscape.
Mm-hmm.
I think one thing that could change
Mm-hmm.
is understanding that we understand natural rhythm and we understand how nature and ecology exist on nice to be involved, like you said, at the master plan stage.
Hmm.
Say, okay, there is a seasonal stream going through this site. Can we acknowledge that? And can we site our buildings or site our infrastructure to accept that the water will be flowing through and to let it do that and to let the rhythms of nature continue? That would be fantastic. That
Hmm.
needs to change, definitely. I think that would be fantastic if they could acknowledge that landscape architects can read these things on site,
Hmm.
which I haven't seen so far.
What makes us think if it hadn't changed for 30 years or 40 years, then how can we expect it to change while we are not changing ourselves?
I
What can we do?
not a good idea to expect the youngest lot to do this.
Hmm.
I think it's the fighting that we should, and maybe the generation just after us, they should be doing the fighting too. And we are to some extent, but I think landscape architecture as a field is so scattered
Hmm.
that you can make an impact with a certain developer in a certain area and not have that impact carried through necessarily in other places. The tricky one. Yeah. But I think this idea of a landscape architect as activist
Hmm.
needs to, we need to put it in our DNA that we need to fight as activists for nature, for natural systems in the city. वो करना पड़ेगा.
But if I talk about what is a general scenario, okay, so for example, I'll take my example. Okay, I graduated as a landscape architect, and most of the firms in the city, they are not practicing like ecological, what do you call it, led or ecology first landscape practices. They're not following that. And I don't blame everyone to not follow it because there are, some kind of demands that are very specific to some kind of projects, right? And if you look at builders' perspective, if they have suppose they have 10 acres of land and they have to provide parking space. So how do we, I mean, there somewhere or the other, we'll have to design on podium. And some people can also say कि चलो at least वो concrete तो नहीं दिख रहा है. You still have a green cover to it. But then how do we change this system where we say that, a landscape is directly tied up with ecology and directly tied up with climate change or nature?
I'll give you an example. I was working on a site in Rajasthan, and I think it was a 15-acre site housing. Fortunately, it wasn't on a podium because there was enough land. So what we did through Google Earth images and through mapping what happened during the monsoon
Hmm.
was that there was a seasonal stream flowing through the site. And as it was going through under roads or through roads, through a lawn. And so what we proposed was at the point where the stream comes into the site,
Hmm.
block it with a boundary wall, put a railing there, create a shallow swale.
Hmm.
Let's change the road a little bit.
Hmm.
That shallow swale at one point run parallel to the road, and
Hmm.
the road in a channel. And then let's take it out the other side and take it out of the site again through a gully.
Hmm. Yeah.
So these are little things, but I think that it's useful. If you've got podiums on 90% of the site, it's very difficult to actually do anything at all. So I think we also lazy, don't have to be lazy. Opportunity we need to identify and at least do our best to. It can be done. There are some situations. I'm teaching in Mumbai now, and when I talk to my students, and some of them have good experience of working in the field. I think 95% of the projects they've worked on have been podium land because of the tightness of space in Mumbai. So understand that you can't do it everywhere.
So, coming back to the original theme, I think we got a little too emotional because of landscape.
I always get emotional about it.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So, the theme of this particular episode is to help students understand if education, be it bachelor's or be it master's, is for them, first thing, and second is if yes, then how to proceed further, what to expect after a master's degree. It's largely around that. Yeah, landscape architecture being, of course, one of the branches to it. Yeah, so if I talk about education and the industry scenario, which is, it's not a secret to anyone that, thus the fee is high. You have to grind for almost, with sleepless nights and so many juries, so many exams happening for 5 years. And then again, you are treated, as a fresher, of course, but it takes almost 2 to 3 years to just acknowledge that, yes, I am a new person to this field and I'm still learning. Yeah. So, keeping this industry scenario in mind, do you really think students of today should they pursue a formal education?
Um, Even professional like architectural.
Yes.
Um, if you
Let's
want
talk
to
about our industry specific. Let's talk
ask,
about B.arch first.
if economic sense,
Mm.
unfortunately, it doesn't. And like you said, it's no secret. You were talking about no secrets of the hard work you have to put in college. I'm saying there's no secret in how architects are paid, what
Yeah.
is abysmal. It's
Yeah.
ridiculous for the amount of work that's gone into
Mm.
getting a degree.
Mm.
It comes down, it's an overused word, but passion,
Okay.
interested enough in this field. Are you in love with the field? Hopefully, that love continues when you study.
Mm.
I would talk about landscape architecture specifically. I think it's really nicely situated between art and science.
Mhm.
It's one of the most important professions in the world today,
Yeah.
in climate change and environmental disasters and all kinds of things. I think landscape architecture has some of the answers, not all of them. So, if we try and heal the land, we're in a great position to do things that heal the land rather than
Mm.
start it further. What I'd like to say, and I'm sorry, this is not specifically addressed to students,
It's okay. It's
uh,
okay.
but to colleges, I'd love to see landscape architecture students being taken from other fields. I see no reason why somebody should go through the grind of 5 years of architecture,
Mm.
come eligible to do a landscape master.
Yeah.
So just imagine, Saumya, if you will, somebody from fine art, a painter,
Mm.
ecologist, or a journalist, joining, doing a degree, and then becoming a landscape architect. I mean, I think our field would be immensely enriched if we had
Mm.
people from. So maybe we don't need to go through that grind of 5 years.
Yes. Maybe a 3 year degree would suffice.
And then, because I know that as you move through life, you change. Some of the things that are important to you perhaps change in your mind.
Mm.
Why should not I have done an English degree and worked as a journalist for 3 years. And I suddenly said, landscape looks beautiful and I think it's good for the earth. Why should I not be able to do a master's in landscape?
Yeah.
So then that 5 year grind maybe is, incidental and not essential to do this. Then I think even then landscape architects are badly paid as well. We know that. It's a tough one.
Where do we start the change? For the newer,
Is not in the hands of the younger generation. The change has to be in the hands of clients and consultants. Consultants should be aware of how much value they bring to a project. They should charge properly and they should pass the money they earn, the good money they earn to their. I think that's the, it's not easy, but it's the easiest way or the straightest way I can think. You and I know that the number of students who are opting for architecture first and then a master's later is
thinking, yes.
I mean, I know that landscape architecture programs across India struggle to fill the seats, except for maybe one or two colleges. So, passion, I guess. Are you passionate enough about it? And second, are you ready to? Not necessarily.
But this sounds like a lot of social service to me.
It is to some extent.
It's like,
Understand. So that generation which is coming up.
yeah.
If I'm imbued with the fire of doing good for the earth, did you find that you could survive on that?
No, I did not. First of all, see, if I talk about my personal experience, it was the ecology that led me to landscape architecture, frankly. I was into sustainable architecture. I was into ecology first designs. But my experience told me that it's not widely acceptable. And it's like an artist. If you are very, very great at your art, only then you are paid enough. But otherwise, it's dying for everything. It's peanuts. Because not all the clients are willing to accept why are you, what you described, Kate. Instead of a full-fledged boundary wall, you can, create a partition through which the swale can go, right? Not every client will understand that. And putting up a fight for a very long time, it's difficult for most of the people. So, in my opinion, I mean, I might not be completely right here for I am speaking for myself. I'm not speaking for everyone. But it's really, really difficult to do good to the earth unless you tie that to direct economic benefits. For example, I follow an influencer on social media. The only one of the comments that she passed out was we all talk about minimalism. But what does it actually mean to be minimalistic? If I own two talks, but I only use one of it, the remaining 1,000 rupees that I invested in that talk, I could have invested in gold or I could have invested somewhere else. So, can we not tie that up? For example, we tie that up for solar panels, right? This will, suppose you are spending 1 lakh rupees in a solar panel thing, and this can make the same amount of money come back to you in 5 years, and for the rest of the life, the electricity is free for you, which comes out to be X amount. Can we not tie that up with everything, with every good that we want to do? It's something that yes, because common man only, you know, the only thing that they think about is money. Builders think about money. Anyone. And the most tragic thing that I find, and I don't know how to put it out, but architects who are the designers, who are the brains behind well functional buildings, well lit spaces, which have a direct benefit to mental health and everything. But we are not able to fulfill the demands for the common people. It's the builders that do. They have that kind of resources. They are the ones who have the power. What I feel is if it does not have to be other way around, but we should be at least walking shoulder to shoulder with them. That is somewhere the good can happen.
So feel that it's a bit like water on a stone.
Hmm.
You don't see any immediate change, but over time, it does make a different impression in the stone. What happened in the stone. So
Yeah.
thinking that if you cannot change a builder's mind for that project,
Hmm.
I think we still have to keep arguing, fighting what we think is important. An example,
Hmm.
when I did that thing of the swale and
Hmm. Hmm.
there was no additional cost to the client, or there was minimal additional cost. So I think sometimes, and you save the client money most of the time. So I think we can demonstrate that with the example of native keys versus
Exotic. Yeah, yeah.
if the builder is telling me that they want a line of Ficus benjamina,
Hmm.
I said, look, polyalthia or Ashok will do the same job.
Hmm.
It's slower growing,
Hmm.
such large trees, but it will block the pollution. Birds will nest in it. It will provide fruit, and it will create a little
Hmm.
ecosystem of its own. And say, you have to give it 3 more years
Hmm.
than Ficus benjamina would take, but eventually it will make a huge difference
Hmm.
to your site as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
Life on your that's
Hmm.
even the hardest builder will. What's the farak padega?
So, what about if we become the builders ourselves? There is a group called Total Environment in Bangalore. They sell one of the priciest apartments in Bangalore. And when you see the design language and everything, they use concrete. It's not like they're not using concrete, but everything is so rooted in ground. They are fulfilling the needs of people who want to buy. It's still not those concrete jungles. So most of the buildings, I think all the buildings that they do, they are red brick.
Mhm.
At least they're cladded with clay tiles. And then they have gardens on every floor. They have open spaces. They have a very nice design philosophy that comes up. And I was listening to one of the interviews of this person, Mr. Kamal. He is an architect, and his journey started when he was trying to buy an apartment for himself. He realized that whatever other builders are providing, it's not sufficient. Okay, it is a house, but it's not the right kind of house that people should be stuck with for their lives. That's why he came up with that. But as I was pitching this design and build idea to other architects who came on the podcast, everyone was so against it. They were like, see, we are consultants. Our job is to design. Our job is not to manage contractors. Our job is not to deliver turnkey projects, as we call it.
Mm.
What are your thoughts on this thing?
So I did my master's in the US. A couple of my teachers were actually doing design build. And there's, that hard boiled line between contractor and consultant. It's not
Mhm.
that extreme over there. You do have more control over the product when you're
Mhm.
building it as well as designing. I've practiced most of my life in Delhi.
Mhm.
And Delhi is notorious for payments not being made to consultants, contractors, everyone. I have heard, so the consultant is like the middle person, right, between the client and the contractor. And I've heard so many hard luck stories of people not getting paid. So if we say that we have money, enough money, do we want to risk an investment to design build, which may not get repaid by the client? That's the tricky thing. Advantages, I can see two or three.
Hmm.
Like I said, some of my teachers in the US were doing it.
Yeah.
Advantage is you have much greater control over the final product. And the compromises you make are compromises that usually you are okay with.
Hmm.
Um, your profit margins are larger than a consultancy only. Uh, Make do less project, give more loving attention to the projects you have. That's the plus. The pluses.
Mm.
Right? The negatives. And I was just saying I practiced in Delhi a lot,
Mhm.
and Delhi clients and are notorious for not
Not paying.
paying payments
Yeah.
to consultants and
Yeah.
already then as a design build firm invested a lot.
Mm.
And then if you don't get paid,
Mm.
then it's more damaging than not getting paid as a consultant because you've actually put the money into things on the ground.
Mm.
So it's even more damaging than consultants not. So that's a very risky thing.
Mm.
Um, but yeah, the rewards potentially are high.
Mm.
What about have you seen apart from
Mm.
these? And this is a firm of architects, huh? Not
Yes.
landscape.
No, no, no. So they call themselves architects and builders. So they are a builder firm,
Mm-hmm.
and their designers or the founders are architects.
Are they a large enough firm to one
Ye-
design wing, one construction, one site wing?
Yeah.
Basically, yeah.
Yeah.
So it's a consortium more than
Yes.
a single person.
Not, I won't call it a firm. It's a private, I think, company.
Mm.
It's a builder company,
Right?
which was founded by architects, and that's the only difference. But it is a huge difference. Yeah. I would actually love to see architects stepping up in these kind of roles because I think where the power lies, the difference lies.
Mm.
And it's not only about money, right? I mean, yes, there is a lot of reward in this, but money is not the only reward which comes with this kind of setup. You don't have to run behind clients anymore.
Mm.
Yeah, architects, we don't charge enough.
It's a vicious cycle. Charge enough, don't give
Eh,
enough time. You can't give enough attention
mm,
to a project because you haven't charged enough.
right.
Don't give enough attention. You
Mm,
don't add enough value.
mm,
So you feel you can't charge enough because you're just
yeah.
getting the bare minimum drawings made quickly.
Yeah.
Becomes vicious.
Yeah. Okay.
Answers and solutions. The
Another thing, sir, you pointed out that architecture and especially landscape architecture is declining in numbers, right? I read this article on The Wire from a very, very known architect who passed away recently. He said that earlier we used to have handful of architects and now we have so many architects. So the quality is also declining. And what do we do with these many architects? On the other hand, Council of Architecture, the president, he recently passed a statement saying that we need at least 15 lakh architects in India to fulfill that kind of demand that we have for housing and for construction industry. But on ground, we don't see any change, right? We see colleges coming up and then shutting down.
mm.
Like,
We see colleges which are very low on quality
yeah.
of the people who teach, even infrastructure. Like you said, the fly by night colleges that shut down.
So coming back to the original question, right? What is the value of education? So if I am a 17-year-old kid who have just graduated from high school or from 12th standard, and now I want to pursue education. I understand we discussed this. Ki if you're looking in monetary terms, then B.arch will not make sense for you because it is a long process. But in general, so you had mentioned this point also, right? That people who are looking to think independently, that's where the value lies. And we also had Prem Chandrabarkar on the podcast, and he also mentioned the exact same thing that education should only be concerned with education and not with the industry skills. That becomes the problem that we talk about, right? But as a student of architecture, you know, if I talk about myself only, when I graduated, when I stepped out of college, there was a huge difference on in what I was taught and what the industry expected out of me. all employers were saying ki this was a common statement across all employers ki we are not going to pay enough. One reason, of course, because they can't. Second reason is even if they can, that's the industry standard because graduates are not providing that kind of value. And if I don't blame them, but even as a practicing architect, when I used to practice, even I wanted to give away some work to hire some people with me, but the quality was really not up to the mark.
Mhm.
And colleges will say ki this is what CEO has described us, this setup going on. I mean, this vicious cycle, who is going to take responsibility and ultimately the situation and the effect, it comes down to that young graduate who is looking for a job or who is looking to open his firm. Oh, then, I mean, again, what is the value?
The dilemma. Everyone talks about this dilemma. कि
Hmm.
जो लोग निकलते हैं, do you want them to be ready to make working drawings for you?
Hmm.
Do you want them to be systematic thinkers and
Hmm.
people who question existing logic, critical thinkers, etc.?
Hmm.
I'd prefer a critical thinker,
Hmm.
somebody who is just okay with, very good at making work. I think also for the person themselves who is graduate,
Hmm.
because I may be good at making working drawing. It's very tough to create a graduate who's really good at both.
Hmm.
So the school or the college has to decide where they're going. Their vision to be this graduate or that kind of.
Hmm.
If a person is really good at making working drawing, they're an immediate asset to profit. Within a month, they're
Hmm.
producing. What happens to them afterward? Do they stay stuck at making working drawings for the rest of their lives? When they, if they open their own firms,
Hmm.
are they capable of going beyond the basic thinking? As a proprietor of a very small firm, I would always choose somebody whose portfolio showed something original and whose conversation can gauge, which way are they cut and right? Yeah, I'll do this.
Hmm.
Think a little differently. I would always opt for that person rather than the other kind, the working.
Hmm.
Often heard landscape architect,
Hmm.
we need to spend 6 months to 8 months training.
I was coming. Yeah.
So I can understand where they're coming from
Hmm.
because they need to get their drawings done, for this person.
Really small in our industry, right? It's not like big IT companies like Infosys or TCS who have this, yeah, so pura have that 6 months program.
Also saying, read the board of advisors meeting. They were also saying we train them, and in 9 months they've left for another firm.
Yeah.
It's a tricky thing.
What would be your suggestion to graduates then? Ki- Let's assume that we have a student who is not entirely at fault. He has spent 5 years grinding and learning the basics of architecture, and now he wants to go for a decent job. And he has spent a lot of money. I'm not saying that it's an immediate return. I'm not saying that, and it can't be expected truly in any field. But what advice would you give to a architecture graduate to fit into this scenario where firms are not paying well and it's not his fault, or where firms are demanding too much from him, asking for knowing working drawings from day one, asking for having that clarity on concepts, having the knowledge of materials, etc., etc.
Right.
And where colleges, they are not taking responsibility because COA has some guidelines that they have already followed. I will also come to the same situation and business's point of view also. But in this scenario, what would you advise to that graduate?
Okay, I'd like to take a step back. Easier, much easier to gain critical thinking skills in college
Mm.
than take in working in a firm, because there are deadlines and you don't usually, for a few years, reach that decision making,
Mm.
or you to it, or if you don't show that skill.
Mm.
So assess critical thinking, very
Mm.
simplistic division,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
it's not that simple, of course. So the skills are easier to pick up when you than the critical thinking ability. So I would still say critical thinking and in colleges should be paramount.
Mm.
And skills in the recent meeting, one of the things that was talked about by these hardcore architects
Mm.
was that can we closer connection between education and in that perhaps every term, or
Mm.
the last 2 or 3 terms, you have to find an office to work in.
Mm.
And this is apart from the internship. And can the internship shift it to the fifth year, to the last year?
But this is not in the hands of students, right? एंड कॉलेजेस में तो कुछ भी करने के लिए बहुत टाइम लगता है दे विल नॉट यू नो चेंज एनीथिंग इन अ फ्लिक ऐसा तो कुछ होगा ही नहीं तो देन व्हाट कम्स ऑन स्टूडेंट्स पार्ट मतलब पॉइंट इज कि हाउ कैन वी बी मतलब हमें पता है कि सिस्टम कुछ नहीं करने वाला है तो हाउ कैन वी बी सेल्फ रिलायंट एंड हाउ कैन वी टेक चार्ज ऑफ आवर करियर्स
I think one thing that I can do, and I definitely should have done, was work during every holiday. Whenever you have 2 months or so, work in an office. And it would be interesting if you could work in different offices. So you'll pick up skills, of course, but you'll also learn the ways of working of various types of offices, which will make you better prepared to be immediately useful to your um, first serious employee. I think that would be one thing I would strongly recommend. And I was very lazy. I never did any work in the. No. I think it would have helped. So that I think is one concrete step that you can definitely. It is definite. What is the role you want to perform? Maybe working in these offices will help you understand, do I want to be that critical thinker, or do I want to be a cog, a very efficient cog in a wheel? Then I will try and get those things from my education. The rest of my time, which I'm studying, I know that I want to head in this direction. So the projects I choose, the thesis, etc., the way I explore myself and my designs are perhaps that geared towards the kind of things I want. To go with the first one, तो हमें यही देते हैं. We have to design here and we have to design a resort and all. Even within that, there are multiple ways you can nation. There is that freedom. It's tough to be so clear when you're younger. I think that if you get exposed to different ways of working, one way to look, these things interest me, or everything interests me, or the nitty-gritty of psych work really interests me. Keep working toward that, both in your training, approach your coursework.
That might be a good start but again there is another point to it. There are many offices who reject 2 months internship because it's a lot of work and lot of effort in their end.
So they don't want intern.
They don't want interns who they don't want interns at all. And when the time period is only 2 months, it's even worse.
Mhm.
And I'm sure there would be some offices who would
Absolutely.
want.
And this whole argument of whether you pay interns or don't pay them,
Mm.
maybe if it's in your own city, you're prepared to work without pay.
Yeah.
The office is good, does good work.
Mm.
And every time
Mm.
a place to work, exploring different things. Maybe you're exploring an office that specializes in read
Mm.
to see if that is what really. or a hardcore commercial practice, or maybe a more ecological kind of ways of exploring firm, helping to clarify your own mind.
Okay, coming to masters now, how does an architecture graduate know if masters is for him, her, or not?
Okay, so I remember we talked about this, discuss
Yeah.
very basic things where you would say a master's. So I'm going to talk about landscape because that's my specialization. I can see three basic reasons for doing a master.
Mm,
One is to work in a landscape firm
mm,
or to create your own landscape firm. The second is to teach. If you're in a landscape faculty, you need to have a master's degree. And third, if you want to go on further, uh, research and then perhaps do a PhD, which will again enhance your chances of getting a professor.
mm,
Those are the three.
mm,
Uh, three
mm. So nothing about increasing better career prospects, money.
but that's not that much money. There's a little more money in landscape working in a firm,
Mm.
but not that much more.
It's not much. I mean, 10% or 20% maximum, and then you spend another 2 years in college. That's a possibility.
Yes, I remember telling all my first semester MLA students,
Yeah.
forget you have a life. This is a master's degree. You don't have a life.
Yeah.
Grind. There's so much work involved
Yeah.
in a master.
Yeah.
And it's a culture shock often. Bachelor, there's work involved. Uh, can still.
And coming out of a college, stepping into industry is different. It's easier because that's the general flow. But going out of industry back to college, it's really good. Then coming out and starting again,
Right.
y- one needs to have a lot of conviction in what course they are pursuing.
Correct. But question I'd like to ask you, how long did you work after your bachelor?
1 year.
Okay. So did you enjoy studying?
I loved, I loved it, frankly.
Hmm.
Yeah, but that was my own passion because I wanted to learn.
Hmm.
Yeah, no one forced me to go for a master's degree. So after a B.arch degree, there are only 3 or 4 prospects for an architecture graduate, right? So one, either you pursue a job, either you go and open your own firm or, find freelance projects. And third is a master's because teaching and PhD is only a step ahead of master's. It can't fall just right after B.arch. So I was discussing the prospects after B.arch. I see people doing master's degree just to increase their career prospects because either they can freelance, either they can work in a job. When they have worked in an office or in job for almost 4 to 5 years, then what's new? They don't want, if they don't want to freelance or open their own firm. Either they do it for that, either the other reason is to go outside of India, which their master's degree becomes an important stepping stone for them. Another major misconception is that your salary will increase and your package will increase.
But not to that.
Not to that level. Yeah, yeah. So that's the common issues that I find in people my age pursuing masters.
Mm.
Yeah, I just wanted to touch upon that.
Do a master's after a few
Mm.
tough to go back and to the grind of long nights and not sleep. But you have grown mentally. You have sort of clarified your thinking as to what you would like to do with life.
Mm.
And to my opinion, and I did a master's exactly 1 year after I finished my BR.
Mhm.
If you have some working time and I think you gain a lot more out of the masters than if you just zoom into it next year.
Mm.
a greater maturity
Mm.
to your work and to your thinking and to your study.
Mm.
It might be a good idea to work for a bit, clarify what you want to do,
Mm.
which direction you want to go, become a little more mature, and then do the masters. Uh, always, and, you know. Meanwhile, if you're doing a masters abroad, the amount of money you spend is large, and does it translate directly into financial returns because you have a foreign degree? No.
No.
But the amount of growth
Mm.
by seeing different things, meeting people from all over the world, having teachers from everywhere,
Mm.
learning different ways that other countries work in. I think that is the life
Mm-hmm.
contributes directly to your salary or not. It contributes to your growth as a person.
Mm.
So it's worth it in that context, I would say.
No, that's true. And I'm not against it. And masters has helped me a lot personally, building that confidence and building the mindset shift that comes with a master's degree. Not the question here. But another problem that I found after pursuing masters is that personally my career options were reduced because I stepped into a very specific niche. Like we discussed, if there are a handful of architects, landscape architects are almost next to 10 or 20. Yeah, it's a very small number.
Yes.
So if the number of landscape architects small, then the number of landscape architects are even smaller. So I have literally handful of firms that I can literally count on my fingertips that I can join as a landscape architecture graduate.
Mhm.
So even after any master's degree in architecture, the options are not very broad. They become quite narrow. This is one thing. Another thing I found personally very difficult was to set up a landscape architecture office only because of the sheer scale of the projects. Now, I'm not saying if someone is doing an interior design master's, it's difficult for them also. It definitely depends upon the course that we did. So, for example, UD people, their life is even difficult than landscape architects because landscape
Mhm.
are still architects.
Mm.
They are though definitely a different gene altogether. Masters might not be for everyone. This is what I am concluding now. You have to be very thinking very critically. What is it that you want to get from masters? If it's yeah, please.
But again, I'm going to a tangential story.
Yeah, please, please.
It's close to me because it's about my, and she's really good at art.
Mhm.
And through school, she did some beautiful pieces of art, mostly painting with spray paint and kinds of things. And my wife thought she'd take art
Mm.
as a undergraduate subject because she was so good at it.
Mhm.
She took up psychology and completed a degree in psychology, a minor in social. And we were talking to my sister-in-law, who was an artist, a fine artist, and she's taught art in schools for many years, and she's an artist. Her daughter had said, "Do art as a hobby and as a relief. I
Mhm.
don't necessarily want it as a
Profession.
profession." My sister-in-law said, "Very interesting." She's make her a better psychologist. The fact that she's done art, so it doesn't need to become her profession. The
Mm.
same way, if you do a master's,
Mm.
in say urban design or landscape, it doesn't stop you from going back to architecture. It also makes you a better architect. Is
Mm.
what I feel. So yeah, the linear logic is architecture कर लिया, masters कर लिया,
Mm.
तो जिस फील्ड में masters है, मुझे वही करना है. It's
Mm.
not that essential, you know.
Yeah.
And you've learned, you work for 2 years, you have दुनिया भर का knowledge about that field, does it?
Mm.
Right? So you are better. Yeah, if you want to go the linear way, lessens your options. still
Yeah. Yeah. Just one last perspective. No, actually, not last. I have two more things to add. Okay, one thing is you touched upon importance of masters if you want to pursue PhD or higher study.
stepping stone. Yeah.
It's a stepping stone. So, what prospects does architects with master's degree have for PhD in India? I really don't know anything about PhD here. So,
So there aren't that many research positions.
mm,
PhD holders or people who are pursuing a PhD will find it much easier to get professorships. Professorships get you a higher pay scale, and permanent faculty positions are usually assistant professorships, associate professorships, or full professorships. And PhDs are more and more now required to get a permanent faculty position. So that important. So that's the academic part. Also, if research interests you, we have people who are teaching and also pursuing very serious research and publishing books and other. Not as much happening as India, but there are people.
yeah.
So, there's a stepping stone, as I said.
Okay. And our career prospects as a professorship, that's the highest level that we can see. I think I should not ask this question because by that time the age factor kicks in, right?
No, I mean, the assistant professors were 30 years old,
Hmm.
or, so it's not that all only white haired people become professors.
But I think PhD
But
takes a lot of time. I mean, 7 years, so you have B.arch.
5 years is more often the thing. 5 years, uh, an accepted sort of thing. Less than that is damn good. You finished it in 4 years,
Hmm.
and 7 is the maximum that you're
Right.
allowed before you have to read.
Basically, one graduates from 12th standard in approximately 17 to 18 age. And even if we, so 2 years of master make 5 years of grad,
23
and
plus
then 25, then 30 years minimum.
6. Yeah, so you've been studying then for since you were 5 or
Teaching.
4.
Yeah.
So you've been studying for 26 years. It depends. So now I don't, it's too late for me. I don't want to do it.
Hmm.
Of being a PhD scholar is quite exciting, I think. And
Okay.
there are all kinds of people. Right? So there are people who want to get deep and let's dive into the practice.
Hmm.
And there are people who enjoy research and writing and reading and other things.
Hmm.
So there are people who thoroughly enjoy doing a master's and then, faculty position and a PhD,
I mean,
whichever order.
right.
So it comes back to that thing of looking around, reading a lot, and
Hmm.
thinking about what you want,
Hmm.
which direction you want.
Hmm. Right.
So, yeah.
Now I want to call in the practicing landscape architect or the business owner side of you here.
Yes, yeah.
We were discussing the point of view of a student, of an architecture graduate. What does he do in such situation? But the situation is really difficult for business owners also. So we can't say that everything is easy for students. Imagine a situation where a 25-year-old or a 27-year-old architect has a firm that has been running for a year or so.
Mm.
It's really a nascent firm, and they want to hire architects. Now, any firm who wants to hire an architecture graduate, the quality that they see in like the work that they see, most of the students they are not able to meet those kind of standards because it's really, really bad, the situation. Then what can a studio firm do on its part to make things right? One thought, of course, is you can, select candidates. You can filter candidates. But if they don't want to filter, is there anything else that they can do?
I can tell you about my personal journey. And so I didn't have a lot of money to pump into my firm.
Mm.
So I started off doing everything on my own. And this is
Okay.
what one of my clients called PN to proprietor services. You're getting a photocopy also, you're making chai also, and you're doing the thinking on design.
Oh.
When I then said, okay, it's getting too much for me, I have too many projects to do totally alone, I
Mm.
hired a draftsperson.
Okay.
I didn't hire an architect or a landscape architect because I didn't have that much money.
Mm.
I hired a draftsperson, and that person was with me for many years, I think 10, 15 years. Meanwhile, an architect, and then later landscape architects as well.
Mm.
Quite a few people have gone through my firm, like you did through Akshay's,
Mm.
and then got inspired and did a land.
Mm. Mm.
So that's quite fulfilling because you sort of spread your passion, right? And sorry about the disappointment that came after the masters.
Oh.
But what can we do? The person since the new we can kill them.
Mhm.
We can transfer passion about a field,
Mm.
and the architect or the trainee will then decide whether that's for them or not. This
Mm.
we should try as even small firms to expose a trainee or a fresh architect to all facets of the work we do.
Mm.
If we need research done, let's ask them to do. They may not do it perfect.
Mhm.
If we go to site, let's take them to site.
Mm.
Let's give them an opportunity to create a conceptual design. We may or may not use it. Everything contributes to the growth of the person, right?
Mm.
Uh, that is one thing I think we can is expose them to many facets of the profession and then leave it to that person whether they want to follow one facet or whether they even want to do a master's in this.
Mm.
And of course, be very honest about financial prospects.
How?
Tell them that this is what you can expect as a master's holder. And things are so easily available now, which they want architects know exactly how much they can expect. Uh,
Because when you are thinking of doing a master's degree, then everyone will tell you that, ah, yeah, the prospects are better. Should go for it. So sometimes that happens because no one wants to take the blame that I told him not to do it.
right.
I
Question
think
is maybe not that much honesty.
I have not seen that much honesty, but I am speaking from my point of view. I don't know what happens everywhere. I can't speak for everyone. So,
So, I mean, I'm just wondering, you tell me if this is true or not. And this is probably before your time.
mm,
You feel people came in, some people came into the masters
mm.
with the aim of delaying getting married because there was pressure.
A lot.
They do, no? Happen. It
Yeah.
happen.
But then, sir, I don't think that's right. Only because ma-
So that was a factor.
no, I'm saying that if someone wants to delay that, masters in architecture is not the right way. You know, because it's really, really difficult to
Better
that.
to fight, better to fight with your parents.
Yeah, that
Masters.
yeah. So I think at least in our batch, as
Mm.
far as I remember, no one was like that. We all wanted, at least everyone wanted a degree from SPA. At least that was the bare
Right.
minimum. They did not even want to learn landscape.
Yeah, so maybe my evidence is anecdotal. Just asking a few people
Yeah.
have do a master's, and a few of them actually came out and didn't speak back. I mean, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, all right. Okay, sir. I think I've already taken a lot of time today.
Totally enjoyed this. Vision.
All right, all right. Is there any concluding thought that you would like to share?
I think one of the things we talked about initially, maybe not today, was
Mhm. Mhm.
mm, one thing I found is the students who are coming in now to do a master's
Mm-hmm.
are more informed.
Yeah.
They're committed to what they want to do. So if they've come in for the landscape architecture masters,
Mm.
they've listed and
Mm.
they knew they wanted to do it.
Mm.
That's a slight change. There may students like that early, but the whole batch usually wasn't really wanted to do landscape architecture.
Mm.
Now I'm finding less numbers,
Mm.
committed individuals. Yeah, यही करना है मुझे.
Mm.
Want to do a master.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's one change I found. So
Mm.
uh,
It
talk-
can be. Yeah. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you found Converse valuable, you can subscribe to the podcast on YouTube and Spotify. You can find all past episodes and know more about us on Insyd.ai. See you in the next episode.